Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we sift through stacks of sources, articles, all that research, really, and boil it down to what you actually need to know. Our goal, like always, is giving you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, uncovering the essential stuff, and maybe, some surprising connections along the way. Today, though, we're going into a story that's, well, it's so deeply disturbing, it's actually shaped some of the horror movies that still give us chills. Think about films like Psycho or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, maybe The Silence of the Lambs, that raw, unsettling feeling they have. What if I told you that the most grotesque parts, those villains, their awful acts, what if they all trace back to one real person? That's what we're diving into today, the truly unsettling story of Edward Gein. He's the man whose dark life out in rural Wisconsin basically became the nightmare fuel for some of fiction's scariest figures. We've pulled together a lot of different sources, detailed ones, to try and piece together a full picture. It's grim, obviously, but it's a really significant dark chapter.
And it's important as we go through this, not just to focus on the what, the horrifying details are there, of course, but we really need to try and understand the why. What was going on psychologically? How does someone get to that point? And what does it tell us maybe about the darker side of, well, human nature? It's a look into a really disturbed mind, and it forces you to think about things you might not want to.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. Edward Gein's early life, his family. He was born in 1906. His older brother, Henry, was born a few years earlier, 1902. Their parents were Augusta and George. Augusta. She sounds like quite a figure. Described as physically imposing, intimidating, very stern. She was raised in this incredibly strict religious home, apparently with regular beatings from her own father, very rigid beliefs. George, the father, he was different, reserved, kind of dignified even, an orphan. Rumor was he was an alcoholic, spent a lot of his money on drink.
Yeah, and their marriage sounds like it was just incredibly toxic. Augusta apparently picked George because she thought he'd be easy to control, but she would just unleash on him verbally, calling him worthless, a lazy dog, even in public. Just brutal. And George, well, sometimes after drinking, he'd come home and beat her. It got so bad, Augusta would actually pray for him to die. Yet, despite all that horror, our sources say she had this intense craving for the appearance of a normal family.
For having children.
So Henry and Edward are born in La Crosse, Wisconsin. But then in 1915, Augusta makes a big move. She forces George to move the family out of La Crosse, she called it a sinkhole of filth, to this isolated 155-acre farm way out in Plainfield, Wisconsin. Her reasoning, it was a more righteous location. Basically, she wanted to cut them off, and she did. She was absolutely obsessed with keeping her sons away from anything she saw as sinful or dangerous, especially women. She called them sinful, whorish women. Apparently believed every single woman except herself was a whore and basically an instrument of the devil.
Yeah, so this extreme religious teaching, combined with being totally isolated out on the farm, it just completely warped Edward's view of everything. Their whole lives were just farm chores and school.
Yeah.
And straight home after school. No hanging around, no friends.
And you see the effects documented, right? He was incredibly shy, no friends at all. Teachers, classmates, they noticed these strange mannerisms, like he just burst out laughing randomly. He apparently told people he was laughing at his own inside jokes, which, must have seemed really odd, unsettling even, and his mother. She absolutely forbade any friendship, saw them as inviting sin. If he even mentioned talking to someone, she'd apparently fly off to handle. So you have this total lack of social skills, this suffocating control. It's a recipe for a really distorted development.
And right at the center of it all was this incredibly intense bond between Edward and Augusta. He later called her his first love, his best friend. It sounds like a complete obsession. Things started to change a bit in April 1940. George, the father, died. Heart failure, probably linked to his drinking. So that left Henry and Edward needing to pick up odd jobs around town to make ends meet. And Henry, the older brother, he started to get worried about Ed's attachment to their mom. Henry was starting his own life. He was dating a divorced single mother, planning to move in with her. And he kept trying to push Edward a bit, like, get out there, meet some women, live your own life. He even started criticizing Augusta directly to Edward, apparently spoke poorly of her, and Edward did not like that at all. Then something really suspicious happens. Henry dies, May 16th, 1944. The story goes he and Edward were out burning some marsh vegetation on the farm, and the fire supposedly got out of control. The fire department comes, puts it out. Edward then reports Henry missing. They find Henry's body face down. Now, initially they ruled it heart failure, later changed it to asphyxiation. But here's the key thing. His body had bruises on his head.
And that's just, it's chilling, isn't it? Back then, the police apparently dismissed any idea of foul play, maybe lack of resources, maybe just didn't consider it. But knowing what we know now, well, The speculation is strong that Edward killed him. Some accounts even suggest Edward seemed, well, almost happy afterwards to finally have his mother all to himself. Henry was the only one challenging that dynamic.
Awful.
Yeah.
And then, just a year after Henry's death, Augusta has a stroke. She's confined to bed. Edward becomes her total caregiver, day and night, completely devoted. But even then, even sick in bed, she kept up the abuse, calling him a weakling, a failure, telling him he'd never be able to survive without her. Augusta finally died in December 1945. Edward was 39, and he was, by all accounts, completely devastated, utterly alone. No life skills, no social skills, just like she'd always told him.
And this is where things really spiral downwards, fast. He's alone in this huge, rundown farmhouse, and what he does is, it's very telling psychologically. He boards up all the rooms, just seals them off, all except his mother's bedroom. That room he kept pristine, perfect condition, like a shrine. It's like he was trying to literally wall off the reality that she was gone, to preserve her space and maybe her memory in this really unhealthy way. The rest of the house, though, which became this horrifying mess. Piles of garbage, junk he hoarded, dust everywhere. Classic signs of severe hoarding, really. He ended up living mostly in the kitchen area, surrounded by all this filth, a complete breakdown.
So after she died, he became even more of a recluse. Barely ever left the farm. People only saw him when he ran errands, maybe stopped for a beer at Mary Hogan's tavern sometimes. And it was only later, after everything came out, that people looked back and realized just how weird some of his comments and jokes had been. For instance, Mary Hogan, the woman who owned the tavern, she disappeared one day, vanished. All that was left was a pool of blood in the tavern, and Ed. He apparently made these really bizarre, tasteless jokes afterwards about her staying overnight at his house. Chilling in hindsight. But the event that blew everything wide open was Bernice Warden's disappearance, November 16, 1957. Bernice worked at the local hardware store. She was 58, a widow. Her son, Frank Warden, came back from deer hunting that afternoon, stopped by the store, and he knew immediately something was wrong. The store's unlocked, back door's open, and there's a trail of blood leading from the cash register area at the back. Frank then found something absolutely crucial, a sales receipt for a half-gallon of antifreeze, and the name on the receipt, Ed Gein. He was the last person known to be in the store.
That receipt was the turning point. Frank told the police his mother was missing, mentioned the antifreeze purchase, and boom. Suspicion immediately falls on Gein. The police head straight out to his remote farm to question him about Bernice. They had no idea what they were about to walk into.
What they found, it's hard to even comprehend. They got to the Gein farm, started searching. In this shed, what they called the summer kitchen behind the main house, they found Bernice Warden's body. She was hanging upside down by her feet from a pulley, naked. She'd been cut open from her pelvis right up to her chest, disemboweled. And she was decapitated. The officers who found her were just stunned, immediately called for backup. The scene was that horrific. And then they started searching the house itself, what became known as Ed Gein's House of Horrors. And just a warning to you listening, the details here are extremely graphic, but they are real. They're documented police findings. Inside the house, it was like something out of the worst nightmare imaginable, just item after gruesome item. There was a chair, upholstered in human skin, lampshades made from human flesh, skulls, human skulls that had been sawed off at the top and were being used as soup bowls, a box filled with human noses, a belt made from women's nipples. They found a window shade pull, decorated with a pair of human lips, a shoebox containing dried female genitalia, faces of 9 different women, peeled off, kept intact somehow, mounted to the walls like trophies he'd made clothing, a long-sleeved shirt sewn together from different pieces of human skin, with actual breasts, women's breasts he'd peeled off someone attached to the front, leggings made from skin, a corset made from a female torso, skin and bone, skulls on his bedpost. They found Mary Hogan's face in a plastic bag, fingernails, tongues, human organs in the fridge, a human heart on the stove. It's just unbelievable.
And when they questioned him, his explanation was possibly even more disturbing. He said he was making a whole bodysuit. The skin shirt, the leggings, the corset with breasts. He wanted to literally wear women's skin, dress up as a woman. Specifically, he said, to pretend to be his mother. He admitted he would put on this skin outfit at night, sometimes even go outside wearing it. It was about becoming her, embodying her in this grotesque way. He also explained why he started killing rather than just rotting graves. The skin from the buried bodies he dug up, it was too dry and hard to work with. He needed new and fresh skin because it was, in his words, plump and moisturized. It was a practical consideration for his horrific crafts, driving him from grave robbing to murder, all tied to this obsession with his mother.
The search went on into the early morning. Around 4:30 a.m., they found a bloody burlap sack. Inside was Bernice Warden's head, freshly severed. He'd hammered large nails into her ears connected with twine. His plan. He told police he was going to hang it on his wall, just another decoration. Investigators eventually estimated that the remains in that house came from about 15 different bodies. Gein confessed pretty quickly. He admitted he killed Bernice Warden, and later he admitted to killing Mary Hogan, the tavern owner, too. So 2 confirmed murders. But all those other bodies, where did they come from? He told them for years, about 12 years after his mother died, he made regular nighttime visits to the local cemeteries. Sometimes a friend named Gus apparently went with him, though Gus claimed he didn't help with the digging or the crafting later. They'd just dig up recently buried bodies, women mostly, that reminded him of his mother.
The legal process was, as you'd expect, complicated. He was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder for Bernice Warden. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Initially, the court found him unfit to stand trial, mentally incompetent. So he was sent to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. He stayed there for 10 years. Then, a decade later, they decided he was sane enough to understand the proceedings and assist in his defense. So he stood trial. It was quick. Within a week, he was found guilty of first-degree murder. But because he was legally sane at the time of trial, but likely insane at the time of the crime, he was returned to mental institutions, where he stayed for the rest of his life.
In the house, that house of horrors. The community obviously wanted it gone. It was actually put up for auction. But before it could be sold, it mysteriously burned down, just completely destroyed by fire. Arson was suspected, but never proven. Honestly, the local feeling was that people were actually kind of happy it was gone, like wiping a stain off the town. Ed Gein himself died in the institution on July 26, 1984. He was buried back in Plainfield, near his family. But even in death, there was this morbid fascination. People started visiting his grave and chipping off pieces of his headstone for souvenirs. It got so bad that in the year 2000, the entire headstone was stolen. It turned up later in Seattle, oddly enough. But because of all that, Ed Gein no longer has a marked grave.
You know, despite the relatively small number of confirmed murders compared to some other infamous figures, Gein's cultural impact has been massive, outsized, really. His specific, bizarre crimes, the grave robbing, the skin crafting, the intense mother fixation, tapped into something deeply disturbing. Robert Bloch used him as inspiration for Norman Bates and his novel Psycho, which Hitchcock then turned into the iconic film in 1960. That mother obsession, the isolated setting, it's pure Gein. Then you have Deranged in 1974 with a killer named Ezra, who is very clearly based on Gein's necrophilia and creations. Same year, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Leatherface and his family living in rural squalor using human remains for furniture and masks, strong echoes of Gein's house, and maybe most famously, The Silence of the Lambs in 1991. The character Buffalo Bill, who skins his victims to make a woman's suit, that's directly lifted from Gein's confessions, plus countless documentaries, books. He became this archetype of the rural madman. There's even debate, was he technically a serial killer given only 2 confirmed murders? Or is body snatcher or maybe trophy collector more accurate, considering the grave robbing was primary for so long? Yeah. But whatever label you use, it's undeniable he was profoundly sick. A unique kind of horror.
It's such a disturbing story. This deep dive really highlights how a truly toxic upbringing, that extreme isolation, how it can just devastate a person's development, and the horrors that can fester when severe mental illness goes unchecked in that kind of environment. It's a chilling example of, well, the darkest potential.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What responsibility, if any, does a community have to notice someone slipping through the cracks, those oddities, the weird jokes? How do you tell the difference between someone who's just eccentric and harmless, especially if they're isolated, and someone who is genuinely dangerous? Or maybe it's just impossible to truly know or predict that kind of descent until it's tragically too late. It's an uncomfortable question to sit with.
Well, thank you for joining us for this. Well, this incredibly dark, but hopefully insightful deep dive into the Ed Gein story. We appreciate you sticking with us and wanting to understand these complex, unsettling, real-world events. Maybe take a moment to think about the things we've uncovered. Until next time, we'll see you on the next deep dive.